Hello everybody and welcome to Mr. Stanier's Chess Academy. This is the beginners lesson number 4 and what we're going to do today is we're going to look at 3 separate things. First thing, we're going to look at another rule of chess which I haven't introduced you to yet, called castling. We're then going to have a look a little bit more at what to do at the start of a game of chess. We began to look at this in lesson 3, but we're going to look at a little bit more detail now in lesson 4. And then the final thing we're going to do is we're going to look at a very typical checkmate pattern, which is called the kiss of death. So first of all, this rule which I haven't explained to you so far, which is called castling. Now, I think you remember I told you in one of maybe a first or second lesson about the movement of the pawn. Now, the movement of the pawn usually is just one move forward. However, about 400 years ago, people began to think the game of chess was a little bit too slow, and so they introduced this new rule where on the first move the white pawn could move 2 spaces forward, just to speed the game up a bit, because it was taking too long. It was at the same time as well they decided that the queen could move as many squares as she wanted to. Before this she moved just like the king. So these 2 rules were introduced to speed the game up. Okay, so the queen could move lots and the pawn could go forward 2 spaces in its first move if it wanted to. But there's another move that they introduced 400 years ago to speed the game up, to make it look more snappier and more popular. And this move was called castling, and it's a little bit complicated, so pay attention. So it goes like this. So 400 years ago, before castling was invented, what many chess players wanted to do is they wanted to get their king out of the centre of the board and to a corner, so that it was nice and safe and away from the centre of attack. And so what chess players had to do is they would move this pawn up, and then they would move the king there, and then they'd move the king there, and they'd move the rook there, and then move the king there. So that was going to be 1, 2, 3, 4 moves. And usually black would be doing the same kind of move at the same time. And so people said, well, instead of having this kind of thing which everyone's doing and it takes so long, why don't we just reduce that to 1 move? And that's what castling is. It is getting your king to the centre, to the corner of the board, or near the corner of the board, and your rook coming out of the corner, so it can begin to play a more active part in the game. Okay, so this is called castling. So instead of this, and this, it is just 1 move. So the king moves 2 spaces to the right, and the rook moves 2 spaces to the left. Okay, and that is known as castling, and it's 1 move. And when you do it, and you're playing over the board, then make sure you touch the king first. You move the king first before the rook. It's just part of the etiquette. So king moves 2 and rook moves 1. Okay, and that's castling. You can do that as a move. Now, a couple of things about this. First of all, if there's a piece in between, you can't do it, because technically the king can't move. So if the bishop was there, you can't castle. Oh. If the knight is here, you can't castle. Also, if, say, we had a bishop here, black bishop. Now, traditionally, before the castling rule, the king wouldn't be able to move here to go there and do there, to do that and do that, because if he moves into f1, he'd be in check, and that would be an illegal move. You can't move into check, can you? So if when you castle, you'd be castling through check. Yeah, so if it moves to f1, it would be check. You're not going to move to f1, you're going to move to g1, but you're moving through f1, so you're moving through check. That's not allowed either. Okay, so you cannot castle if you're going to go through check. Also, if you are in check, so if black, for example, come down here and they say check, you're not allowed to castle to get out of that check. You have to either block it or move your king. Okay, so so you can't castle out of check. Okay, so you can't castle. You can't castle if there's a piece in the way. You can't castle through check. You can't castle out of check. You also can't castle if you have already. Oh, my computer's playing up again today. So if you've already moved your king. So say you're in this position and you've moved your king once, and then you move it back. You can't castle now because you've moved your king. Okay, so if you've moved your king at all, then you can't castle. I got caught out of this in the tournament last year where I'd forgotten to move my king, went to castle, and my opponent said, well, that's an illegal move. It's quite embarrassing. He let me off with it, but it's quite embarrassing. So those are things to know about castling. Just one more thing. You can also castle on your queen side. So this is your king side because it's the king side of the board. But anything this side is what we call the queen side of the board. So you can castle queen side. So if you moved your bishop and your knight and your queen out of the way, so there's nothing between the king and the rook here, you can castle on your queen side. Now this is slightly different to casting on your king side, and it's a little bit more aggressive. So the king, just as if you're casting on king side, moves two spaces to the left, and the rook comes 3 spaces to the right. So you castle like this. So you've got 2 spaces here to the corner when you castle on the queen side. But if you have a look here, you've got your rook setting up in the middle, a very powerful piece. But your king's a little bit exposed, and hopefully a move soon after this, you'll want to move your king just 1 more space to the left to make sure it's in the corner. Okay, so there we go. That is castling, and I hope you can understand why I didn't explain that to you in the first couple of lessons, because it is quite a complicated rule, but it's a very, very important rule in the game of chess. So let's just go over that again. So if you manage to move your bishop out, you manage to move your knight out, then you can castle. So that's 2 spaces to the right for the king, 1 space left, 2 spaces left for the rook. And here the king can castle here, like that. Okay, and queen side, you can castle queen side, remember. So if the piece is between the king and the queen, move out of the way, then you can castle 2 spaces left for the king, 3 spaces right for the rook, and then you've castled queen side. Okay, and you can't castle through check and out of check, and if you've moved the king. Okay, so there you go, that's castling, and we'll revisit it in future lessons just to make sure you can remember it. Okay, the start of the game. Now, in the last lesson, lesson 3, we talked about how important these central squares of the board were when we're starting a game of chess, and we also talked about how it's really important to move what we call your minor pieces, the pieces worth 3 points, bishops and the knights, out onto the battlefield as quickly as possible at the start of the game. Now, I'm going to give you a third rule that we need to look to do to a really good start, and that is to castle, to get your king away from the centre of the board. So there are 3 golden rules of a good opening: is moving our pawns so they're attacking the middle of the board, moving our minor pieces, our bishops and our knights, out onto the battlefield attacking the middle of the board if we can, and we need to castle to get our king out of danger. So let's have a look at a perfect opening by white. This is what we call the classical opening. Okay, so it's a perfect opening. So so as we know, the move your pawn forward there to e4, so it's covering this central square and this central square. Let's say black's a little bit cowardly to do that today. Now, as we know, we want to move our minor pieces out, so we might move our knight there. Let's say black might do this today, and then we're going to move our bishop there. There we go. Black might do that now. At this point, we have a choice, don't we? We can either begin to try and move these minor pieces, or we can castle. So let's castle now to get our king out of the centre. And so now we've castled. Remember, we still need to get these minor pieces out. So so we're going to move that piece out. And now we're going to, we can't move this bishop out because it's being blocked by these pawns. So we might want to move this pawn so that it can move the bishop next go. And then we move the bishop out. And there we are. There we have what's known as the classic opening. And you can see that we've moved our two bishops out, putting pressure onto these central squares. We've got our pawns out, putting pressure onto all of these central squares. We've got our knights out, putting pressure onto these central squares and defending these pawns here, and our king is nice and safely in the centre. Okay, so when you start a game of chess, you might not be able to do all of these moves because if the opponent, for example, does this move, and then you might do that, and then they do this move, then you can't move your bishop to this square here because it will get taken, and you don't want that. You need to avoid getting your pieces taken. So have a think about each move carefully. Don't just do it automatically, but it's something good to aim for. So let's just go over those again. So we start by moving our pawn, our king's pawn, to e4, setting up a nice attack in the centre. We are then going to try and move out these minor pieces here. And we'll do that. And at this point, you can think about castling. So let's castle. And now we've castled, we can start thinking about moving these minor pieces out. And then bishop can't move, so we need to move a pawn. And there we have it. I want to put my bishop here, but I can't because of this pawn here on e4 will take it. So I'm going to put my bishop, what are you doing there, pawn? I'm going to put my bishop here, which is quite safe. Okay, so we're now ready to have a look at the rest of the game. Okay, we're going to go into the middle game. But that's a really good way to think about starting a game of chess. If you're white or if you're black. One more time, let's move a pawn into the middle. Let's take out our minor pieces. That's right, let's castle. And now we move out these minor pieces here. Can't move my bishop. Let's move the pawn. and then I think we move it to there now. And there we are. We've moved all of our pieces out, and we're ready to start thinking deeply about the game. Great. So what I really recommend you do is, if you haven't quite got the gist of that, rewind the video, watch it again, and then just get a board out and just move the white pieces, move the black pieces, just to practice getting your pieces out, getting the bishops and the knights out, and castling. And the more you do it, the more you'll remember the pattern, or find somebody at home to play against and just practice how to open up a game of chess with them. But look out, think about whether you're going to get your pieces taken if you're going to put them where you want them to go. Okay, the last thing we're going to look at today is we're going to look at the Kiss of Death. And the Kiss of Death is a name which chess players give for a particularly common what we call mating pattern. That means that a combination that gets opponent checkmate, which means that you've won the game. So if we look at this position here, it is white's move, okay, and they can get checkmate next move using the Kiss of Death. And this is what the Kiss of Death is the king comes and moves on a square next to the king. Mwah. There we go, and gives the king the Kiss of Death. If we got checkmate from further back, you can't kiss him. That's why it's called the Kiss of Death. And it's a really good thing to look for. So, you know, if you're in this position and you're white and you think, well, what should I do? You should be thinking, well, actually, can I look to see if I can set up a Kiss of Death? So you'd be thinking, well, this square here is where I'd want to do this Kiss of Death. If I move my bishop here, then that would protect that square, so the queen would be safe to come along and give the king a Kiss of Death. Okay, so looking out for these patterns. You can't just do this, because then the king can take the queen. Okay, the king will give the queen a Kiss of Death. You need a piece to what we call support the queen to make sure that she's not taken, which is why you need this bishop here, because if the king takes the queen, the bishop will take the king. Okay, and it's the end of the game. So let me show you another position where there's a Kiss of Death. So let's have a look here. So we'll move that bishop here. So so if black, let me just set that up properly. Set that up properly. So here we go. So if it's white to move, white can get checkmate with the Kiss of Death. Have a look closely. Can you see where this Kiss of Death will happen? If you haven't seen it yet, then maybe pause the video and keep thinking. But the Kiss of Death happens, I'm going to tell you the answer now, on this square here. And so the queen will move to g6, and then checkmate. And the king cannot take the queen because the pawn will take the king. So the pawn is supporting the queen, allowing the Kiss of Death. Let's have a look at another example. So here we are. So this is white to move to get checkmate with the Kiss of Death. Can you see the move? Again, if you haven't seen it, then press pause and see if you can. But I'm going to tell you the answer now. So the queen is going to move on to e7 and give the Kiss of Death, and it's supported by the knight here, 1, 2 and across, so the king can't take back. Another example. So let's move the king over here. There we are, and it is now white to move And can you see the kiss of death here? It's moving your queen to b4, and then getting checkmate there. So maybe get aboard and set up some other examples of the kiss of death checkmate, but it's a very common way to get checkmate, and why your queen is so important, because it's only really with the queen can you get checkmate this easily. Okay, so keep your queen safe throughout the game. Do not put her in silly places during the game. There's a little saying amongst chess players: don't get mum to come and play out with the kids too early. So mum being the queen. So keep her, in reserve, and then towards the end of the game, she can burst onto the chessboard, and she can be one of the keys to getting a really good checkmate like this. So have a look out for those whilst you're playing. So we have had a look at the castling rule. We have had a look at how to start a game of chess confidently, and we have looked at the meeting pattern of the kiss of death. So hopefully you're getting lots of practice playing chess at home. The more you play, the more you practice, the better you'll get. And we'll talk more about how we can improve as chess players and as chess thinkers next lesson. So I hope to see you later.